So my name's Izzy. I'm working on this project that I'm going to talk about with Dr. Hubert. And yeah, so what I'm looking at is how an individual's personality affects the way that we comprehend language. So what we know is that people interpret errors differently depending on their beliefs and values, and also depending on their personality traits. And we use errors to look at that because it's just one phenomenon that we can look at to investigate language comprehension. And the errors can be very different in kind. So we have simple errors like he always walk his dog, or things like bees generally make concrete instead of honey, what they actually make. But then we also have clashes with our social cultural norms. So we're not supposed to do that, Abby. So for example, this would be a male person saying, I wish I looked like Britney Spears. Or even stronger things like a male saying that they're pregnant. So how differently exactly do people interpret language like this? So to investigate this, we ran a self-paced listening experiment, which basically means that the listener is presented with sentences chopped up into chunks. And then at the end of each chunk, they're going to press a button to indicate that they have made sense of the sentence up until this point. And then we can use those response times to kind of see how quickly they were able to make sense of the sentence. So what we typically see is that all kinds of errors will give us a delayed response time. And then we ran our participants through a couple of standardized personality tests, and then we just relayed those scores back to the delay times that we saw in the response times. So now what we're looking at here, okay, the colors are a little bit difficult to see probably, but the blue ones here are really fast response times. So basically we see barely any delay at all for errors. And then over here, this kind of yellow-orangey color, these are high delays. So what we're looking at is, here we have conscientiousness scores. So if you're really high on this scale, so all the way over here, you're really diligent with any task that you're given, for example. And then this scale here is the fantasy scale. So that would mean things like you have a vivid imagination, or you're really good at identifying with characters in a novel, for example. So if you're, that's what happens when you're all the way high up here. And then what we see is that, we're looking at female listeners here, we see that if a female listener is really conscientious, so over here, and quite imaginative as well, we see that they're thrown off a lot by errors. So they come across this error and they're really stumped, they don't know what to do. And then when we look at male listeners, everything else is being kept the same. So we still have the same scales as you can see here. But we're looking at male listeners, you see immediately this is quite a different picture. So we see that conscientiousness, if they're really conscientious, they don't care about errors. They just proceed as if everything had happened normally. But then we see that we get the highest delays for medium scores, right? And we also see that the fantasy score doesn't actually matter all that much for male listeners. So, so what we see here is that we have a gender effect, which is kind of funky. We don't really know why this is happening at this point, but it's there. And we're going to have to look at this. We're going to do this with some brain imaging studies and also some pupillometry, which measures your pupil size. So that's going to be pretty interesting. And what we also see is that your individual personality really affects the way you comprehend language. It's also a fairly new field of research, just like what Dr. Colson was talking about earlier. So there's not a lot to go by, but I think we're getting there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if there's time for questions, but either way, you can tweet at me or you can email me if you want. So thank you.